Welcome to a last day of school true horror story. It was the final day of senior year, and the school halls buzzed with an energy that only came once a year. A wild mix of excitement, nostalgia, and the unspoken fear of what came next. Everyone was signing yearbooks, hugging friends, and taking selfies near the lockers while the loudspeakers played upbeat songs that echoed off the linoleum floors like some kind of farewell anthem. I stood by the trophy case near the front office, watching the scene unfold and thinking how strange it felt to be done forever with a place that had once felt like a second home. Teachers were letting students wander between classrooms, the usual structure completely dissolved under the weight of summer's approach. I clutched my yearbook and joined the parade of students drifting through the hallways looking for signatures from anyone who had ever smiled at me in the last 4 years. I didn't think much of it when I saw a name written in shaky block letters on the inside back cover of my yearbook. The name was Liam Rook, and it came with a message that read, "I will remember you forever." No context, no joke, no inside reference. It felt oddly serious, like something out of place among the dozens of doodles and jokes that filled the rest of the book. I didn't know anyone named Liam Rook. I flipped back through the pages, scanning every class photo and group shot, but I didn't find his face anywhere. Thinking maybe he was a friend of a friend, I decided not to let it bother me. It was probably just some prank or a weird coincidence, or so I told myself. The day went on like a dream, fading into something softer and stranger than reality. The lights in the hallway began to flicker as students emptied out. Classroom doors left swinging slowly closed behind them, and lockers banged shut one by one, echoing down the corridors like distant thunder. I had stayed later than most, wandering past the gym and into the older wing of the school where the tiles changed color and the air smelled faintly of dust and forgotten things. It was quiet there, too quiet in fact, like even the building itself was waiting for something to happen. I passed the old art room where the lights were still on, but no one was inside. Paintbrushes lay scattered across the counter, and unfinished canvases leaned against the wall. One had a face on it, half-painted, eyes wide, staring directly outward, but the brush strokes stopped abruptly at the mouth as if someone had been interrupted halfway through. I felt an odd chill then and turned away quickly, trying to shake the feeling of being watched. But the moment I stepped back into the hallway, I saw it again, that name scrawled in red across a locker. Liam Rook, only this time it wasn't in yearbook ink. It looked like it had been scratched directly into the metal surface, and something about the uneven lines made me feel sick, like it had been carved with shaking hands. I turned in a slow circle, expecting to see someone there, anyone, but the hallway was completely empty, and the lights above me flickered again, then shut off completely for just a second, plunging everything into a shadow that felt way too deep for just one blink of darkness. I stood there frozen in that thick quiet, trying to pretend the darkness hadn't wrapped itself around me like wet cloth, trying to pretend I wasn't hearing something move down the hallway behind me, something soft and scraping like bare feet dragging across tile, and I knew I should run or shout or laugh it off, but my legs wouldn't to move, and my throat felt closed tight like it had forgotten how to make sound. The lights blinked back on, buzzing overhead like angry insects, and when I turned around, there was nothing there, just the long stretch of hallway stretching into silence. The air felt heavier now, like I had stepped into some other version of the school, one where the walls listened and the shadows remembered things. I walked quickly, trying not to look too closely at the bulletin boards, which now held flyers I didn't recognize, torn edges and dates that didn't make sense. Some said 1993. Others had names of students I'd never heard of, all written in faded ink as though the paper had aged decades in days. I passed the trophy case near the science wing, and the glass was cracked, not shattered, just a long thin line down the center, and inside the photos of old teams and graduates were covered in dust, but one stood out clean and recent, and it showed a boy in a varsity jacket standing beside a woman with hollow eyes, and the nameplate below read, "Liam Rook Memorial Wing, dedicated 1999, which made no sense because the old wing was still being used and no one ever said anything about a memorial, and no one ever mentioned a Liam Rook in any graduation list or student filing. E-scene, and suddenly I knew deep in my bones that something was wrong with this building, and I had to get out now before it remembered I was still here. I started walking faster, not running, because somehow that felt worse, like if I ran, it would chase me, like it wanted me to panic, like it fed on fear, and the hallway just kept going. Even though I should have reached the end by now, I passed the same classroom door twice, the one with the peeling sticker that said room 2B, and both times the door was slightly open, just a sliver, like it was inviting me in, like it was waiting. I didn't look inside, I kept going, but I could feel it, something watching from the other side, like if I glanced even for a second, it would be right there waiting with wide eyes and a mouth too still. I turned a corner I didn't recognize, and suddenly I was in the old part of the school, the one we weren't supposed to use anymore because of the asbestos or the cracks or maybe something else no one ever really said. Why, just that it was off limits. But there I was, and the walls were different. Older, they had this yellow tint like old teeth, and the lockers were shorter, thinner, like for kids from a different time, and everything smelled damp and sweet like rotting flowers, and the light above flickered slowly, not fast like in movies, just enough to mess with my sense of time. And sound seemed different here, softer and thicker, like the hallway was swallowing it. I passed a row of windows, but they looked into another hallway, not outside, and in that hallway, I saw myself walking the other direction. Not a reflection, not a mirror, just me from behind, head down, arms stiff like a puppet, and I didn't stop, I didn't breathe, I just kept going because I didn't want to see what happened if that other me turned around. I moved through the hallway, and every step felt heavier, like the air was getting thicker, like it was turning into syrup, and every door I passed had a noise behind it, but not voices. It was like whispers underwater, like breath too close to my ear. But from the other side of the wall, and one door had scratching soft at first, then harder like fingernails, then claws, and I didn't stop. I couldn't stop, because my feet wouldn't let me. They were moving on their own, and I looked down at my shoes, and they weren't mine, they were too small, and they were black, with a thin red stripe, and I had seen those before on the feet of a boy who went missing in 7th grade. They found his backpack, but not him, and now I was wearing his shoes. The lights started to fade, not all at once, just section by section, like the darkness was following me, eating the hallway, and I could hear footsteps behind me, not running, just steady, like someone who didn't need to hurry. And I turned a corner and found myself back at the entrance, but the doors were gone. There was just wall, like there had never been an exit, and I started to cry, but no sound came out. It was like my voice had been taken, like this place didn't allow it. And I heard the bell ring again, but it wasn't the real bell. It was slower, deeper, like it was coming from underground. And when I looked at the hallway again, all the lockers were open just a few inches, and something dark was leaking out of them like smoke, but heavier. It crawled along the floor toward me. I ran. I had to, even if it meant it would chase me, because anything was better than standing still and waiting. And as I ran, I saw shadows move past me faster than I could track, long and thin, like arms that reached from the ceiling and the walls, and they never touched me, but they got closer each time. And I turned down a stairwell that didn't exist before, and the steps were made of wood, not concrete, and they creaked under my feet like they were ready to give in. And I counted them without meaning to 13 steps exactly. And when I reached the bottom, there were no lights, just a red glow from a room at the end of the hall, and the walls down here pulsed like a heartbeat, and there was something written in black on the floor, but I didn't stop to read it. The red glow came from a room that looked like the old boiler room, even though I'd never been inside it, and the door was open just enough to see the edge of something round and metal and moving like a valve turning on its own, and the sound it made was wrong. It didn't hiss. It growled, and I stepped inside. And the light flickered, and I saw drawings on the wall in chalk, hundreds of them. Small stick figures, all with X's for eyes, and every single one was standing in front of a school. And I realized they were all the same school, mine, and beneath them were numbers, dates all different, but all with the same day. June 9th, over and over again, years apart, decades even. And I looked at the boiler, and it had something painted on it, a face, but no eyes, just a mouth too wide to fit and full of teeth that didn't belong to anything human. I backed out of the room, and the hallway behind me was gone, replaced by a mirror, tall and dusty, and I looked into it, and what I saw wasn't me. It looked like me, but older, tired, like something had been eating from the inside. And I reached out to touch the glass, and the other me didn't move, and then it smiled, but I wasn't smiling, and it raised a hand and tapped the glass 3 times, slow and hollow, and from behind me, I heard the valve screech, and the drawings began to shake like they were on paper instead of walls. And I knew if I stayed, I'd be one of them, just another stick figure on the wall with no eyes and a date beneath me, and no one would remember who I was, just that I disappeared on the last day of school, like the others before me. I turned and ran again, but the hallway had changed now. It was endless and full of doors, all slightly open, and I knew behind each one was a version of me, stuck in a loop, or screaming, or already gone. And I heard voices now, not calling for help, but whispering my name slowly and wrong, like they didn't know how to say it, like they were guessing. And one voice sounded like mine, and it begged me to stop and let it in, and I kept running until I saw the clock at the end of the hallway, and it was frozen at 3. 33, and the second hand ticked once every time. I blinked, and when I reached it, I put my hand on it, and everything went silent. The whispers, the growling, the footsteps, and when I opened my eyes, I was back in the classroom, but everyone was frozen, staring ahead, their eyes wide and black, and I knew I had never really left that hallway, and maybe I never would. I tried to move, but my legs felt like they were filled with lead, like something inside me was holding me in place, and the classroom around me started to change slowly. At first, the windows turned black, like night had fallen only outside our school, and the posters on the wall peeled away like old skin, and beneath them were more drawings. This time, not stick figures, but faces, hundreds of faces, all looking afraid, all looking like they had seen what I saw, and some of them looked familiar, like kids from yearbooks I had never met, and I blinked, and suddenly, I was standing, not sitting, and the desks were gone, and the lights were flickering, and I heard my own voice behind me whispering something over and over, but I couldn't make out the words. I turned and saw myself again. This version had its back to me and was facing the chalkboard, and it was writing the same thing again and again, but the chalk wasn't chalk. It was a piece of bone, and the words it wrote melted off the board as soon as they were finished, like they were not meant to be read or remembered, and I stepped closer even though every part of me screamed to run, and I saw the last word before it faded, and it was my name. Not just my first name, my full name, and the date below it was today, and I reached out and touched the shoulder of the other me, and its head turned all the way around without its body moving, and the eyes were hollow, and it smiled, and I felt my heart stop just for a second. The world twisted like a spiral, and I was no longer in the classroom now. I was in the gym, and it was dark. The bleachers were pulled out and filled with mannequins wearing old school uniforms, and they were all turned to face the center of the court, where a single spotlight shined down on a desk, my desk, and something was sitting in my seat, but it was too still, and I walked toward it, and the mannequins turned their heads slowly to follow me, and the floor beneath me creaked like it was alive, like it knew where I was going, and when I got close enough, I saw that it was me again. This version had its mouth sewn shut with red thread, and tears were running down its face, and I tried to speak, but no sound came out. A bell rang again, the same deep, slow bell I had heard earlier, and the gym went pitch black except for the spotlight, and I felt breath on the back of my neck, even though I was alone, or I was supposed to be, and the desk in the center was empty now. But the chair was rocking back and forth, and there were footsteps all around me in the dark, and they didn't belong to shoes, they were bare and wet, and getting closer. And I reached into my pocket for my phone, but instead, I pulled out a small photograph. It was old and burned at the edges, and it showed me standing in front of the school with other kids all looking away from the camera except one who looked straight at it, and I had never seen that kid before, but I knew he wasn't supposed to be in the photo. I dropped the photo, and it vanished before it hit the floor, and the light in the gym flickered, and now all the mannequins were standing and pointing at me, their fingers cracked and broken, and twitching like they were alive, but barely. And I ran through the exit door that wasn't there before and ended up in the cafeteria, and everything was rotten, the tables, the food, the smell was thick like old meat and bleach, and in the center was a birthday cake with my name written on it in red icing, and next to it was a card that just said, "Welcome back." And when I opened it, a scream came out like someone had trapped it in the paper, and I couldn't breathe. And I knew whatever this place was, it didn't want me to leave. The lights went out, and the silence was heavy, like the air had stopped moving. I felt something cold brush past me like a shadow slipping through my skin, and I ran, but the hall stretched on, forever twisting and turning like a nightmare with no escape. And behind me, I heard footsteps. Not my own, slow, steady, and getting closer, the walls whispered my name over and over like a chant, and the door at the end of the hallway was there, but it was locked with no handle, and the key was nowhere to be found, and I screamed. But no sound came out, and the darkness swallowed me whole, and then I woke up in my bed. The sun was rising, and the school day had ended, but I knew what I had seen was not just a dream, because on my desk was a single piece of paper, and written on it in shaky letters was the date, the last day of school, and the words, "You can never leave." The end. This story has now come to an end. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more thrilling and interesting horror stories, then don't forget to subscribe, like, and share my channel. Thank you for watching my video.